Hello everyone. In our session today, we are going to be taking a look at user accounts within Active Directory. We are going to be looking at understanding user accounts, creating user accounts, copying, deleting user accounts, resetting user passwords, disabling user accounts, renaming user accounts, moving user accounts, looking at the account options for users, adding users to groups, creating complex password policy, and looking at the user account properties. A user account in Active Directory represents the people within your organization. We refer to them as security principals. And by security principals, I mean any object within Active Directory that is assigned a security ID. The security ID then is going to be used to access resources in your domain or your company. Those resources can be printers, they can be files, they can be folders. This ID enables you to actually log on to your computer with the username and password. When you have that identity, then your domain controller will authenticate you, meaning that when you log on, the Active Directory database will be checked to make sure that your logon name and your password is there before you can access the domain. After you're authenticated, meaning that your name and your password is logged in Active Directory, then you are then authorized or denied access to the resources within the domain. But there's a catch here. Yes, you are allowed access to the domain, but you cannot access the resources, meaning the files and folders, unless the administrator explicitly gives you permission to access that particular file, folder, or printer. We can compare it to buying an airline ticket. Let's say you are in Antigua and you want to come to Barbados. All you need to have is a ticket and a passport. And that allows you access on the plane, and that allows you entry into the airport. But when you get to the airport, you have to go through customs. And customs will look at your documents and make a determination of whether or not you are granted access to Barbados. Well, it's the same principle that we use here. If the user has a username and password in Active Directory, the user is going to be granted access to the domain. But still, the user will not be able to access any resources unless you, the administrator, explicitly set permission on that particular folder or file or printer, giving that user access. The user's container in Active Directory displays 3 built-in user accounts. We want to look at 2 of them. We want to look at the administrator account, and we want to look at the guest account. I am going to be using the TechNet Virtual Labs to access Active Directory users on computers. I'm already signed in, and you can see here the URL https://technet.microsoft.com/en-us/virtual labs. I'm going to scroll down the screen to select the lab I want. Watch me carefully because I want you to do it for your hands-on lab assignment. I want System Center. So I'm going to click to the left of System Center, expand it. I'm going to expand System Center a second time. And the one that I'm going to choose here is System Center 2012 R2. So I'm going to click in the checkbox, and then I'm going to wait for my labs to come in. The lab or the machine that I want is on page 2. So I'm going to go to the page 2 icon here that says next page. I'm going to click on next page. And you can see here it says page 2 of 3. The machine that I want is the third one in the first row, Hot System Center 2012 R2 Lab 3. So I'm going to click on that lab. I'm going to scroll down the screen and click on Get Started. Next, I want to click on Launch Lab. Make sure you have the correct lab, Lab 3. Click on Launch Lab. And the lab environment is being built, and that can take a bit, so you have to wait until that is completed before you continue. We can see that it has completed. What I want to do is to click on the pin here to the right hand side, and on pin we can see that the lab has been built. So I want to click on OK at this screen. And I want to click on the little icon here that says pin on pin, and I'm going to unpin it. And I'm going to scroll down the screen a little bit. I want to access Server Manager. So I'm going to click on the icon here, Server Manager. And now I want to go to Tools. Click on Tools, Active Directory, Users and Computers. Here, I can see that I have different containers. I have a computer container, I have a domain controller container, and I have a users container. We're looking at the users now, and we want to look at a built-in user, which is the administrator. When you install Active Directory Domain Services, the administrator account is an account that is installed with Active Directory Domain Services. And this administrative account is the built-in account for administering both the server itself and the domain. And then we have the guest account, and they're in alphabetic order, so I have to actually scroll down to see the guest account. Here is the guest account, and the guest account is disabled by default, and that account is used for guest access to the computer or the domain. We want to actually go and create a user within the domain. Now, we're going to create that user within the users container. We want to right-click on users. We want to click on new, and we want to click on user. We're going to be creating two users. The first user is Pat Belgrave. So we're going to type Pat, and her initial is O. I type O, and her last name is Belgrave. We want her user logon name, the name that she's going to use for the username to log in. So we're going to give her P Belgrave. And once you start using a certain naming convention, you should continue with that naming convention for your users. And we see here we have at contoso.com. Contoso would be the domain. So all we do is to type in the user login name. Then we click next. And here you have the password. Now you have some password options here. Ticked off by default is user must change password at next logon. Now if you use this option and you type a password for the user, when the user logs on the first time, the user is going to get a message saying that he or she needs to change their password. If you uncheck this box, which we're going to do, then you can choose either user cannot change password, password never expires, or account is disabled, or all three. We're going to choose user cannot change password, password never expires. And you might be wondering, why would you want to say the account is disabled? Well, maybe the person that you're setting up the account for is in St. Kitts and they have not arrived at the company as yet. But you want to go ahead and set up their account, but you don't want any access to that account, whatever. So you disable the account until you're ready to use it. Or maybe a person is on holiday, you might want to disable that person's account until the person returns to work. Now we're going to try typing the password. Now the password has certain rules. For Windows, we have to use a password account or password that is complex, and I'll show you what I mean. I'm going to simply type the word password in common letters, P-A-S-S-W-O-R-D. I'm going to go into the next box to confirm it, P-A-S-S-W-O-R-D. And I'm going to click next. It says here that my user logon name is P Belgrave, and the user cannot change the password, and the password never expires. Then I'm going to click on finish. When I click on finish, I'm going to get an error. Let's look at that error. It says, Windows cannot set the password for Pat or Belgrave because the password does not meet the password policy requirements. What does that mean? The password policy that is set on the domain has certain requirements, and you have to actually follow those requirements. So I'm going to click OK here. And I'm going to go back, and I'm going to change that password to make it complex. I'm going to type PASSWORD06. I'm going to come into the second box again and type PASSWORD06. Then we're going to click on Next and Finish. And we can see that the user account has been created. Let's scroll down and see if we find that user account. There it is, Pat or Belgrave. Before we continue with looking at this user account, I want to actually show you the particular policy that we're looking at that says that you have to use complex passwords. So to do that, I am going to go back on the dashboard here. And I am going to look at Tools, Group Policy Management. And we're just showing you that policy. I'm going to expand the forest, expand the domain here. The policy that I want is the default domain policy. This default domain policy is intact and installed when you install Active Directory domains and services. I'm going to right click on that policy and I'm going to click on Edit. I'm going to click on Computer Configuration, Policies, Windows Settings, Security Settings, Account Policies, Password Policy, and the policy that we want to look at was the password one. It says password must meet complexity requirements and see it's enabled by default. So we're going to open that up and we see it's enabled, and let's look at the explanation for that policy. It says this security setting determines whether passwords must meet complexity requirements. So once this policy is enabled, you will always have to type a complex password policy. If you don't want to type a complex password policy, what you will have to do is to come here and disable this policy. It says, if this policy is enabled, passwords must meet the following minimum requirements. Not contain the user's account name or parts of the user's full name that exceed 2 consecutive characters. Be at least 6 characters in length. Contain characters from 3 of the following 4 categories. English uppercase characters A through Z. English lowercase characters A through Z. 10 digits 0 through 9. Non-alphabetic characters, for example, you have the exclamation mark, the dollar sign, the pound sign, the percentage sign. Complexity requirements are enforced when passwords are changed or created. So the default, again, as you saw, is that this policy is enabled, which is why when I typed simply just password, I would have gotten that error message. It actually needs you to type a complex password. So I just wanted to show you that. I'm going to cancel this box. We're going to cancel group policy, come out of group policy management, and we want to scroll down and go back into Active Directory users and computers, where we're actually looking at Pat Belgrave. we want to right click on that username that we created, Pat Belgrave. And when we right click, we see that we have a number of things. We can add Pat to a group. We can disable Pat's account. We can reset Pat's password. We can move Pat to a different container. We can delete Pat, cut Pat, rename Pat. All of these things we can do by simply clicking on the box. For example, if Pat forgot her username, let's say that you had chosen the first option where the user has to change the password at the next login. You don't know Pat's account, but you don't know the password that Pat gave. So if Pat forgot her password, you will have no choice but to reset the password. So you will simply go to Pat's account, right click and click reset password. You type the new password, confirm it, decide whether or not she has to change it at next log on. So that's one option there for Pat. Also, we can rename Pat's account if we wanted to. And let's do that again. Right click and rename. And you simply type a new name where you, right here, Pat 0, Pat Belgrave, Pat or Belgrave, that is, not 0. You simply type the new name there if you wanted to rename it. Just like you would do in Windows Explorer for a Word document. To delete Pat's account, you will click on delete and you'll be asked, are you sure you want to delete this user account? One thing I want you to be aware of, if you delete a user's account, it means that you have deleted the security ID on that user. So if you create another account with the same name, it's still not Pat's account. And that happens, that can be a problem. If a user has a problem with logging on, or let's say the user account is corrupted and the user comes to you, you should not delete that user account. The reason why I'm saying you shouldn't delete it is because that account is probably connected to maybe printers, folders, files. And when you delete that account, you actually delete the permission to those resources. So you have to be very careful with that. If you do delete it, you would have to give back that person permission to the resources. Because when you create a new username, then you're actually creating a new security ID. But you can rename or you can reset the password. That does not affect the security ID. Let's right click on Pat again and see what else we can do. We can add Pat to a group. Maybe you have created a group and let's say the sales group, and you want to add Pat to that group. You will simply say add to group and you will type the name of the group, or you can search for the group and simply add Pat to that group. You can also move Pat from the container that she's in. Right now she's in the users container. And maybe you have created another container. Remember, our containers are called OUs or organizational units. So we can, in Active Directory, create organizational units for different departments. For example, we can create an organizational unit for the sales department, the personnel department, the finance department. And we can move users into those OUs or departments. We want to click on the properties for Pat. And here we see that we have a number of tabs. But the one that we want to look at here is the account tab. So we're going to click on account, because on the account tab, we can do lots of things with the user. Here, you see that you have account options. The same account options we had before, but we have option to store the password using reversible encryption. We have an option to say that the account is disabled. We have an option here to require that the user uses a smart card for logon. And we have some other options here that we will go into as we go on with the 7-410 course. We want to look here at account expires. By default, the account never expires. But let's say you wanted this account to expire on a particular date. You'd have to click on end of, and then you would choose the date that you wanted the account to expire. By default, it never expires. We want to go back up to these two tabs, logon hours and logon to. We're going to click on logon hours. Let's say that Pat worked only from 4 to 10. She has flexible working hours. So you only want Pat to be able to log on to your domain between the hours of 4 to 10 for the whole week. Then we want to click on from 4 o'clock to 10 and come down to Friday and say log on permitted. Always check below to make sure you have the right time, 4 p.m. to 10. So since Pat has flexible working hours, that's the only time she's able to log on to her system. So we could go ahead and say OK here. And then you want to choose the computers that Pat will be able to log on to. So you will click on log on to. And by default, Pat can log on to all the computers. But Pat works in the registry department maybe for your company. So you only want Pat to be able to log on to certain computers. So you click on the following computers and you can actually type the computer names and click add to add the computer so that Pat is only able to log on to a particular computer within the organization. So that's how you can be very restrictive with your users about their login hours and the computers that they log on to. I also want to show you here how we can copy a user to create a template to create other users. So I'm going to right click on Pat. I'm going to click on copy. That gives me the option to actually create another user using that same template. What I need to do in the name of another user, so we're going to type Harry, H, and his last name will be Belgrave, and his login name would be H Belgrave. Go ahead and say next. And we're going to type the password for him. It says password 08 and password 08 again. You might be saying to yourself, well, I still have to type in the username and the password. So how does copying the first template actually help me? Well, if you would notice here, where the default should be user must change password at next logon, we have the same thing that we had for Paul. Users cannot change password. Password never expires. So even though we have to type in the new username and new password, we still have the account properties from Pat, so that if Pat was a member of a particular group or particular organizational unit, that same thing would carry forward for all the other users that I use for this particular template. So if I were creating, let's say, 3 users, and the users belong to a particular group, or the users had permission to a particular folder, what I could do is to copy that template, add these other users, so that then I would not have to go back to the new user account and add that user to the same group or give the same permissions that I had given for Paul. So that's how the template option is a good option. If we were creating users, 100 users at a time or 50 users at a time, we would do what we call automation or bulk creation, which is what we're going to look at in our next video. That is the end of this session. I want to thank you for listening.